learning, or just learning basic Git workflow is a huge step for a lot of organizations, let alone GitOps, right? So yeah, I mean, it depends on the culture now, to Thomas's point. And if you're not open to command line, right, and you're not open to writing some code, it's going to be really uncomfortable, and you're going to have a hard time getting buy-in from everybody else in the organization. So yeah, I mean, it's all rooted in DevOps, just like Thomas said, and adopt those patterns, be open to them. And, over time, once your teams are familiar with how Git works, then you can go on to GitOps and start, doing that kind of stuff. And I think that it's going to be huge, man. I mean, I'd love like having a source of authority, right? Like a central place, a mono repo or whatever. It's like, all right, I know exactly what's going on with everything. It's right here. I think that's compelling. They get into it and they're not sure if it's the right move for them. So, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving targets in this world. And I'm excited because all of us have the opportunity to contribute, to this new world. Everything's changing. And I'm really excited about that. So it's a huge opportunity in my mind to get in the game and, start moving the needle forward a little bit, as tech advances. It's a fun time.
Yes, absolutely. I think when I started learning about that, because I started my career as a developer and doing the Angular stuff and the ASP.NET and doing particularly around the Microsoft guy running my application on top of Azure DevOps, that is previously called the Team Foundation, and these kind of stuff. But on that day, I'm really eager to know what is interesting moving right now. So then I start following you. On that day, I continuously be monitoring what you are sending the articles around, what is industry is moving and what is the way forward right now. I think my go-to approach for the audience is right now is, if you're not learning about 13 or 15 other languages in a day, nobody can do it. But at least you can follow these people who are space. Because when I started learning in the Kubernetes, I see what the Linkerd service mesh came into the market. Then I'm following those people, what the service mesh is. But that's give me the up-to-date scenarios where we are heading and where we are moving right now. I think that's the number one go-to approach for everyone who are into this business. Go follow those people who are into this game, who are into this place and talking about a lot of the stuff that we're wondering about. So I missed this as LS stuff in the KubeCon because of the travel section. Next journey is our KubeCon Valencia. So I think I'll be able to catch you up on these kind of stuff. So tell us about the Cloudskills FM and these kind of the activities. What is happening there? I see some of the boot camps is already on the market is right now.
Yeah. So we've been doing a bunch of stuff lately. It's hard to see because I've been recording tons of episodes and they haven't gone out yet. And I'm actually recording one later today with a CEO of a company that's building some really cool stuff in the cloud native space in terms of data analytics. So I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline for Cloudskills.fm where we'll be talking to people that are building products in this cloud native world. We're still bringing on other guests and stuff, but I've got a lot of startups, a lot of organizations that you guys know about, you probably heard about, CEOs and leaders from those organizations coming on. We just finished up doing a Kubernetes from scratch bootcamp that was like 8 weeks. We had Chad Crowell as kind of the point person delivering that. Chad used to work at Linux Academy and A Cloud Guru, so he's an awesome instructor. He's also, a field person, so he's out there working with customers as well as teaching. And I think that a lot of us really need to open up to that. I've been talking about that a lot lately on the podcast and in my social media and stuff. I think that everybody should double down on teaching what they're learning, because if you can teach other people to learn, you can teach yourself, right? And I think in this cloud native world, in the rate of massively fast innovations, right? It's going to be hard to wait around for people to build courses, build YouTube videos if they're not there yet. You need to get into the game of teaching yourself, and the best way to do that is to start teaching others. And the cool part about that is when you're sharing what you're learning and stuff like that, other people getting value out of it, and you're getting value out of it by building your personal brand. So that's kind of like some of the stuff I've been working on at Cloudskills lately. We've got a Linux bootcamp coming up because, a lot of our audience is, from a Windows background. Let's face it, they're doing Windows Server administration. Now they're getting thrown into the fire of Kubernetes, right? So learning the command line stuff, the terminal, learning basics about services and updates and package management and basic systems administration and building container images. That's stuff that we're going to help people with. And it's good to see Thomas with us. What's up, Thomas?
Hey, yes.
Thomas. Wonderful.
Yeah, awesome.
Go ahead. Sorry about the delay, but thank you, Thomas, for joining us today. Thomas is a guest for my episode number 2. Episode number 1, episode number 2 guests are here. It's been a very long time. I think 6 or 7 months we've been catching you up. So Thomas, tell us about the Azure stuff. There are so many certifications around Windows 11. There are a ton of new stuff there. So keep us updated around all the Azure stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff going on in Azure right now. I mean, as always, I should say. And when you specifically talk about certification, there is some really interesting announcement or news basically coming up. So, already announced basically. I should not say coming up, even though the exams are just about to come out. The first thing I should mention, what we announced, are new hybrid certifications, especially for Windows Server admins. So if you are a admin who is like working with Windows Server a lot, but also in a hybrid environment with Azure, we have 2 new exams for that to becoming a certification. And then another one we announced is a new Cosmos DB exam. Which is awesome. New certification for that as well. So if you're building these awesome applications using Cosmos DB in Azure, there is a new exam which goes really deep into, especially just specializes on Cosmos DB, right? This exam is only focused, and there are a lot of other exams which also touch a little bit on Cosmos DB, but this one is really like, okay, if I'm a developer, I'm going for, or even an architect or someone who just works with Cosmos DB, that is the other one we announced, which will be coming soon. It's not that this is available yet, this will be coming soon. And then last but not least, I think one of the biggest news is the Azure Solution Architect change we had. Before we had basically 2 exams for that. We had the AC, now I have to be careful, the 303 and 304, which were basically 2 exams you needed to take just for the solution architect part. In addition, you also needed to have the AC 104 or 204, I think, the developer or the administrator exam to get the Azure or Microsoft certified Azure Solution Architect certification. And now we changed it. We simplified it, actually. We took these both exams, 303 and 304 together, and we created, obviously, 303 and 304 that gives 305, right? So it makes absolutely sense. But this is basically the latest news in a nutshell, what we have there.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing I'll say, just to jump in there, I got to say this. I've been working on Microsoft Pressbooks for the last couple of years. And so I wrote an AZ300 book with a bunch of people. And then a couple of months after it came out, we're like, hey, we need to rewrite it because AZ303 is out. And now AZ303 book is out. And now AZ305 is out. So, I could sit here and complain about that, but I'm not going to, because we all need to get in the game of updating stuff, right? It's going to happen. And this thing moves so fast at this point. We just need to be open to, hey, all right, it's no longer like it was before. Let's get up and let's go to the next thing, right? And keep going.
Yes, absolutely, Mike. That's really difficult because into the Kubernetes and Cloud Native journey, because Kubernetes in the previously using the Docker container under the hood, and everybody putting out courses and material around Docker, and then they shipping the container D. And now people are thinking about, now let's build a container D courses. And that's the same thing in that clouds happening, because there is so much revolutions around because of the Kubernetes and the Docker containers and a lot of moving stuff as well. So wonderful details around the Azure certifications. And let us through about the Windows 11 updates also, because I see the Windows 11 have some kind of sandbox environment where you can check the stuff before putting it to the actual operating system that's Windows. All those features on the Windows 11, because everybody is looking forward to updating their operating system to Windows 11.
Yeah, so it's hard to start there, right? It's like so much things happening, like on the Windows front as well. The stuff you just referred is like the Windows Sandbox feature, and this is actually cool because we had something already a little bit built into like Windows 10 as well. We improved it obviously in Windows 11, and the idea is here, especially like for people who are into security, or if you want to try out something, like if you're an administrator or a developer and you want to not like install something on your machine, what you would initially done is like creating a virtual machine, right? You would probably need to install Hyper-V, then you need to set up the VM, you need to like run this. And then at the end, if you're done, you would just probably delete it again. So a lot of effort for basically just a very short task. Now with the Sandbox system, it still kind of like creates a VM. It's still isolated. It's still using virtualization, but you don't need to like install anything in terms of an operating system. It just gives you a clean sandbox environment of Windows 11 or Windows 10. And then you can put stuff in there. You can try it out. So if you have like some weird attachment, you're not sure if it's secure or not, you don't want to open it on your machine, you just put it in there, and then you can open it in there. And if something happens to the machine, you can see what it does. And then you don't, like, you're just still protected, right? So this, and then at the end you close it and everything is gone. So this is really the principle of it. There is some ways to modify it in certain ways to actually get like some folder mappings and stuff like that. So you can do some really cool advanced stuff as well.
Yeah, these updates, guys, I taking that from following the Mike Thomas Maurer and his website. And then is one place for you to learn about all the updates around Azure and particularly AKS, Kubernetes, and Windows 11. So wonderful details from you. So Mike, we see that there are roadmap. People are talking about the DevOps roadmap. Tell us, that's a really interesting question, because everybody is putting up that. Where the WSL fit into this DevOps roadmap?
Yeah, man. I mean, if you look at the CNCF ecosystem poster, that's enough to like make you run for the hills, right? Like, if like, man, I got to learn all this stuff. So my thing is, I think that the patterns are the most important thing, right? And so the basic punch list of, DevOps fundamentals, infrastructure as code, and source control, and CI/CD, monitoring, all those pillars are super important. But the thing is, there's a million different services and tools and platforms in there. So you need to understand the patterns, right? Because you might get thrown into a completely new CI/CD tool. You might be on Azure DevOps one day, another project comes in, another team from the other side of the organization is like, oh, we're doing this and we're using harness.io instead. And you're like, what? Now you got to go learn that. So the thing is, like, the patterns are most important, or they throw GitHub Actions at you, or they throw GitLab at you when you're using GitHub, you know what I mean? So the basic patterns are the most important thing, right? So you need to understand what are the patterns, and then be open to being able to plug in when somebody throws something at you, with an open mind, and just say, hey, I understand the pattern, and now I just need to understand how I do it, over at GitLab versus GitHub, or with Terraform versus CloudFormation, things like that. And it's going to be hard, man. It's going to be challenging. A lot of us are going to have to, fail in public, have demos that don't work out. And we just need to embrace that, because every single one of us is going to be continuously learning forever from this point forward. So,
yeah, I think one thing, Mike, you just said about the patterns, I think that is really the key here, right? It's not just learning a technology anymore. It's like really learning the patterns, how, like, what's the concept of it? How does it work? And then you basically get familiar with it. Doesn't matter on the underlying tool, or doesn't matter on the features the specific thing has, because as we all know, as you just outlined with the book, right? It's the same thing in the cloud as well, obviously, that things are changing so fast. Today, like, if I today do a project on Azure networking and I do the same thing again in 6 months, holy cow, there will be a lot of things different, and I need to like go in and learn. But as long as you, like you said, as long as I understand the patterns, and as long as I'm familiar with this and I know I need to look at this again, I think I will be fine. And again, I also saw one of your I think it was a tweet or something about cloud jobs, and how insanely like we need people in that space, and like how well you do if you like learn these skills and are in that industry.
That's so true, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just tack on to the end of that. I apologize for cutting you off there, but growth mindset versus fixed mindset is the game at this point. If you're like stuck on, oh, what's the old way of doing it, and we did VMs, and why is this changing, and we're not going that road, huge mistake, because that's fixed mindset. You're saying no to like innovation. So yeah, it's time to like get in experiment mode and be okay with experimenting.
Yes, absolutely. I think the one thing we really appreciate about technology, like these platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, these platforms will give you the access, like what is Mike talking about? If we travel back to 1992 or 2001, then you are learning about something that I doesn't know about it. And then I might be learning about something very ASP.NET. But now, right now, if I am not into the games of DevOps or GitOps or Cloud Native, but I can follow you, what you are teaching about, and then I can set my agenda of the day. At the end of the day, when I go to the sleep, I will scroll through this technology, like GitHub Action, what the GitLab is, what the Azure Stack is, what AKS, what Azure Kubernetes is. I think that's, if you're using the social media in a wonderful way, I think you are being, this ecosystem is for you, because there is so many people who are always talking about and tweaking about these kind of stuff. And I think you are both guys are always into the DevOps market, always talking to the CEOs of the companies, also talking to the recruiters of the companies. Right now, the skills gap is very huge since the inception of Cloud Native. So tell us about what the skill gap is. And let's say if I'm the CEO of the company, how do I find the valuable resource for my company? That's the toughest question for everyone right now.
Well, I can tell. It's funny. I had a similar conversation yesterday, and it's like you just don't find these people, right? And the conversation started actually with people asking about multi-cloud, right? And multi-cloud again. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, right? It's like it depends on how you do it. That just to take everything advanced. Like I want to be very clear. It depends on how you do. But I have like spoken to many customers who think like, okay, oh well, we use Azure a little bit, and we use AWS a little bit, we use Google a little bit, and then so it's already hard enough, as we just talked about it, to find professionals for one cloud provider, for just one. Now try to double that or even like 3 times that, right? You need to have all these skills, so you don't find these people. So you need to find a way. First of all, you need to be obviously very attractive for people. You need to be lucky also to find the right people. And then just to basically, I opened the door now for the whole hybrid multi-cloud discussion, but I want to quickly close that again. The advantages there, what we say when it comes to multi-cloud, or what I think what's right approach, and I learned this term yesterday, is something called like an anchor cloud, right? So you actually learn, let's say in my case, I would learn Azure. So you have your team learning Azure. They get familiar how Azure works. They get familiar how like policies, how the setup in Azure works and everything. And then you can still put in other clouds, right? But you connect them using, for example, Arc and other technologies, and you make them as kind of like secondary clouds. So you use the management from Azure, use Azure Resource Manager, all that, which you're familiar with or your people are familiar with, and then you put them in. So I want to close that gap but to go back to the initial thing. But like really, it's tough, right? It's really tough to find these people. And Mike, you are training so many people, and but I'm sure there's no way you can train enough people for the next decade.
No, we can't. We can't create content fast enough. We can't do boot camps fast enough. It's a big challenge. And I've been having conversations like this as well. And it was something I was talking to people about at KubeCon, but I really believe, you cannot continue to do what you did before, which is, hey, I'm going to send my team to a week of training and then just be like, oh, now we're going to do Cloud Native and everything will be fine because they went to training. You can't do that. You have to continuously learn. So I think what organizations are going to have to do is they're going to have to be able to create those learning experiences internally. And they're going to need to take their senior people or their more qualified people and get them really mentoring and teaching the people in the organization what's going on. Lunch and learns, hackathons. The social support is going to be key because to Thomas's point, you're going to have to train people to do this that have never done this before. And they may be coming from, junior college or something. And you know what I mean? So it's like, there's going to be so much opportunity and there's such a skills gap that you will need to prepare your own people based on your organization's needs. And you're going to have some kind of internal way to do knowledge transfer. And the old school way of us versus them in teams inside a company, that ain't going to work. So that's a culture shift, and that could take a decade, right? So if you're a leader of a company, you've got a tough hill to climb.
Yeah, I love what you just said, like the culture shift, but also like the organizational shift, right? You cannot have these in the cloud world. You can't have these silos anymore. You cannot have networking people. You cannot have storage people and stuff like that. And they all work together somehow in some way of a matrix organization, or they're completely isolated. That just doesn't work, right? It needs to be like a cloud team. I think that is what we always preach and say. Well, think about that as well. Get ready to have that. Give people the opportunity to work that. And also what I see is like, give them opportunity to like full-time work on this, right? You cannot have someone dealing with all the daily tasks they like in terms of like what they did in the past, like a storage administrator who needs now like work 80% of his time work on the old stuff and has only 20% to spend on the cloud. I mean, that just doesn't work. That's not a good way of going forward.
Yeah. I got a funny story I'll share real quick. This was about 1.5 years ago, but I went to a customer's here in town, so I didn't have to travel. But like I basically went over there and did like a 3-day thing, met with their team, and did a bunch of whiteboarding sessions and stuff. And at the end of the 3 days, the team manager was like, "Hey, could you write up a document to give my team so that we know how to migrate over to Kubernetes and get it all running in Azure?" And I'm like, I can't just give you a document and then that's going to magically happen. It's a huge investment, and it might be a complete shift for the organization, right? So you can't buy it off a shelf, right? You can't buy digital transformation off the shelf.
That's a nice sentence. That we should quote that, definitely. You can't buy digital transformation off the shelf.
I stole that from Abel Wang, so looking out for Abel. But yeah, he was the one that said that on Cloudskills FM a couple of years ago. So
nice,
awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that on the topic of this skills gap, I think one of the cloud native companies called Silvercloud, I have talked to that Mark Booth. He's a wonderful, I think his opinion is really important for all of us might be. He said, if I hire someone from my company, I look at the people who are talking about Kubernetes on Twitter, on LinkedIn, who have their YouTube channels, because these are the people who are enthusiastic. They want to see somewhere go. I'm not kind of a person, I knew the Kubernetes is new. I don't go to ask my recruiter to have a 10 years of experience in Kubernetes because it is in a 5-year-old technology. So I take a look at those guys who are into having some kind of podcast or have sessions around this, because these are the people, if not fit into my team, might be give me some feedback around what the stuff I'm going to improve it. So I think that's a go-to approach for most of the companies who are looking forward to the enthusiasts. Go check at those people who are talking about Kubernetes and Cloud Native and Azure on social media. I think these are the people who can shrink the gap, because when they join your company, they can create the environment that is a competitive environment where everybody can learning from each other and can see that this person can go this kind of stuff. Why not? I can put out this kind of stuff as well. So I think this is the conversation I had previously with Mark Booth. I think these points are wonderful. What's your thoughts on this point of view, Mike and Thomas?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first, and then I'll let Thomas jump in. I mean, I know I don't want to speak for Thomas, but I know he's a former MVP and he's a big community guy like I am. And I think that it's insanely important. I mean, just look at this meeting, right? I think all three of us are in completely different time zones, right? We're able to get on here and do this. That's so awesome. In social media, I have to confess, when I first started with it, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm into this. Like, this is weird. I don't need the recognition and all this kind of stuff. But it's the best tool that we've got on the planet to unify people and share what we're learning. So I think we need to get past, maybe some of the discomfort of using social media and putting yourself out there, because it's just a tool to enable collaboration. And now that we're all stuck at home and we can't travel as much as we used to, like, we desperately need it. And, getting into community isn't about, it's not about vanity and fame. It's about contribution and bringing people together. So to me, I think that community is absolutely important. And how do you communicate? Well, it might be a podcast or a YouTube show or whatever, or blog. But yeah, man, that's to me what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there, Mike. And it's a couple of things I want to add there. It's also like, if you're working with, like, especially the cloud technologies, and we really need to work on something which is pretty new, like if something is really new, there is not really a book there. Sometimes not even documentation is there, right? It's like sometimes, like, and I hate to say that, because documentation should be there, right? But then you need to find people who are working on the same challenges, who are working with the same technologies, and actually like, Kelly, how can I find these people? And they're probably like, as we are now, like time zones away from each other, right? But we're all on this like journey together, and we can share solutions with each other. So that is one thing. And then obviously, as you said, like it's perfect to meet these people, to see what they do. And the other thing, and Mike, you really mastered this, I think, is like, if you want to master something, you probably need to like not just talk about it or like use it and do it. You probably need to teach about it, right? That's the moment where you need to be like, same thing. I mean, I'm not saying like the blogs I write is teaching or anything like that, but the moment I write a blog about something, I cannot just like write about the pieces which I was touching right now. It's also about like, I need to research even more and go a step further to understand what is like the whole concept of it. And I think that is also something where, if you put yourself out there, first of all, you make all these awesome connections, but then you also learn more about the stuff. You get even deeper into it. You learn more about it. You try to understand it even deeper than you would have done if you wouldn't have shared anything.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful, I think that's the point of being into these people, because right now we can follow what people are talking about in the whole ecosystem. That the community is so vital for any open source, of every project and every kind of stuff, because there's the people are getting innovations out, innovation down the road as well. So I have, for the how many, I don't know how many years I'm following Mike and Thomas, and always been a wonderful experience for me, because I can't learn. And I always ask people, I can't learn. I wish I can learn 16 different technologies in 24 hours, but I doesn't. I absolutely doesn't. But I need to say, I need to check what is happening in the space. When this space, especially look at the cloud native landscape, I think this makes you feel scary. I think either this place makes you excited, or either you can confess that this place is not for you, because the tools are available right now. And who is the hell has the responsibility to dig in deeper into these technologies and put a blog out and post out? So I think whatever you like to do, I think when I started about, I think I'm not a good blogger, not a good YouTube video, but I think that the podcast is a wonderful place for me, so I can talk to these people, the industry legends. When I started doing this kind of stuff, never think this is going to be hated, but 28 episode, and time is passing out, and so I think before now, let's get conversation going for the 2022, and we are wrapping at least. There are 2 more months remaining for the 2021. So first for the Mike, where the technology is heading for 2022? What's new things coming up in the Cloudskills? Like what's the new Bootcamp coming up? What are your plans? And as for the technology space as well?
Well, I got something really cool to share with you guys, but I can't say anything yet, so it's going to be a little bit. But there will definitely be some major news before the end of the year, so I'll share that. But I think, looking at 2022, if you're thinking ahead next year, I really think that you do need to start paying attention to multiple clouds. And I love Thomas's point of having an anchor, and going from there, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to get people coming in and saying, hey, this team over there, they're doing AWS, and now we got to figure out how to connect that to what you're doing over here with Azure. That's just going to continue to happen. I'm seeing it happen a lot, or hearing about it a lot in the conversations that I'm having. And so, just being open to, even if you only work on Azure all the time, just start like mapping what you know in Azure over to some of these other platforms. That way, when you do get hit with the project and they're like, hey, guess what? We need you to do everything that you just did in Azure over in AWS. And you're going to be like, and also on that other note, I would say in 2022, even if you're not going to like go cloud native, maybe you're at a traditional place and you're 10 years behind and you're always going to be that way, maybe, still start studying this stuff. That way you at least are informed when you get pulled into a meeting and somebody's like, hey, we want to build a Kubernetes cluster, but you only got 50 users. And you understand how to push back because you understand the technology. So study the emerging patterns, even if you don't get a chance to work on them. And, and in 2022, start paying attention to multiple clouds and map what you know in the anchor cloud to the other ones.
Yes. Thomas, can you add on the Azure side as well? Because you are the person who tell us about what's going to be coming up in Azure in 2022.
So first of all, everyone should be curious about next week, right? Next week is Microsoft Ignite. We will have, obviously, I don't give a secret away that we will obviously announce a couple of things which are pretty cool. And again, there is obviously a lot of like stuff happening. I mean, it's way too much. Like every obviously technology, every team, every service will bring new updates, new possibilities, and we will bring obviously new services. What I believe we will see is obviously we already talked about that a lot, like coming like hybrid and multi-cloud and all that stuff. This is definitely going to be a thing which we will see a lot of updates, a lot of like enhancements as well, to exactly make these scenarios even better, right? Right now, we're just starting up with these, we're getting things done. We have already like the base work done, but there's obviously a lot more. And as Mike said, I think one of the also important parts here is that even if you're not working maybe now in these technologies, try to focus on these cloud native stuff. Like try to look at it, at least learn it, try to understand it. I mean, I know it's hard if you don't have the time to actually work with it but at least you get a sense where it is, and make yourself comfortable with the cloud and how these scenarios work. You don't need to understand every single detail, but understand what the benefits of the cloud is. See what really like what advantages do you get out. So when the organization comes and brings you a reason why they want to do something special, that you can actually say, hey, well, this is not the way to achieve it, right? Like we need to do something else to actually get there. And again, if you don't have that knowledge, if you're not like getting informed, you will just like blindly walk into something which you like thought, okay, will work because someone else told you to. And that's not a nice place to be. And trust me, also, like if you currently like try to find jobs in this space and you're probably not successful, if you keep on working and you keep on, the time will come, right? It's not a question if, it's a question when, right? When it's the right job, like time for you to get the job. And we, as in the cloud, we learn that we make mistakes, and the same thing with jobs, right? Sometimes we should apply differently, we should do things differently, but we learn from that, and we need to get used to hearing no. I have a couple of people I talk to, they say, hey, I do this old school stuff, I want to do actually cloud work. But I can't find a job. And I was like, how long have you been trying? I'm like, a month. And I'm like, well, just go ahead, do your stuff, learn from every time. There's a huge opportunity out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I add one thing to that? Sorry, something popped into my head when Thomas was talking. I got to share it on that note. So in 2022,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, in 2022, if you're a leader at a company, right, and you're running teams, now is a good time in 2022 to start making sure that your people can learn continuously, and to start like clearing the path for them so they have time. Thomas mentioned that you might not have time, right? And that's a struggle for a lot of us. Like if you work at a place that's a little bit behind the ball, they're not up to date with everything that's happening. You need to give your teams and people the ability to ramp up incrementally, not just, hey, 2 times a year you're going to training or going to a conference, but every week. What is that going to look like for your teams? And as a leader, that's something you need to start thinking about now to get ready for 2022.
Yeah, and to be honest, Mike, this is absolutely a great point. I mean, this is like something also which pays off, right? If you think about it, like in the past, when time of like services like was different, like we had like Windows Server we need to deploy or Linux servers, and we needed to like do everything. What we spent time is like we read a little bit of concept, a little bit of planning, a little bit of like learning how this works, and then we spent like months of implementing that. Now, with the cloud, it's actually the opposite, right? We spent months learning and planning and figuring stuff out. And then the implementation part is very short. Like you today run a PowerShell script, you run a ARM template, you run the Terraform thing, and the stuff is there. And that's not the problem anymore, right? The time you actually implement something, it's more about the skilling and the idea of like how things are connected. The actual doing, like the actual, like, okay, I want to spin up a AKS cluster in Azure. That's done quickly. The part is to understand it and how do I do it, right? So yeah, and again, so that's absolutely important and key. And again, it pays off, right?
Yes, absolutely. So someone have a wonderful question in the chat. If we think in a cloud agnostic way, what are the tool or public cloud servers that we can use to set up a multi-region or possibly a multi-cloud Kubernetes cluster? And what are the best practices to follow to collect data like app cluster logs and time series data across those multi-cloud clusters? So it's a wonderful question and long question. So Mike, and then Thomas.
All right, I'll jump in first. My first thing is going to be careful what you wish for. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, so I think that's a huge question, but I think that people are going to put out case studies in different types of like reference architectures. That's what you're going to need to do, is find somebody that's putting together a reference architecture that, kind of shows you, how do I deploy service mesh across multiple cloud platforms using different, managed Kubernetes clusters. So, number one, I think that a lot of people are just going to default to managed services and doing things like AKS and EKS and things like that. But yeah, I mean, that's an ambitious project that only certain teams could pull off, right? You're really talking about like platform services, like people that are running giant SaaS services that have thousands of users coming every second, and that has merit. Some of us work there, right? But I think that to answer that question, I mean, it's going to be a reference architecture, probably like 10 or 20 pages, right? Of how do you think about this step by step? Totally, possible. I think that the biggest challenge from an operational standpoint right now is just how do you trace microservices in one cluster, not let alone 3 clouds, right? So my thing would be, make sure that you've got one cloud figured out and you can support Kubernetes in one. And once you got that figured out, then you'll have some confidence in taking a reference architecture and saying, hey, how do we do this across multiple? I don't personally know anybody that's completely done that from scratch at this point. So that's not saying that there isn't anybody out there. I talked to a lot of people though. So I think that it's really early for that kind of architecture. And I think that there would have to be some really specific use cases, and you're gonna have to have you're gonna have to have a lot of detail going into something like that. And it's gonna be hard for me to answer it on the fly on this, but that's kind of my take on it. Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It needs to be a very special use case. I try to understand still, like, if you want to have one like cluster over all places, and I'm a big fan of like going as high as up in the stack as you can. And so that's exactly what like Mike mentioned, is try to go with these managed services. And as far as I know, AKS as well as EKS and probably also the others, they are just running at one cloud provider, right? But that's a good thing. That doesn't mean, like, depending on what you want to achieve, you can still do that, right? You can still have you have AKS in Azure and EKS in AWS, and you can still combine this in one solution architecture in a way they're just not going to be directly connected to each other, and it's probably not necessary, right? So again, depends a little bit on the use case, and you need to understand more, but I would try to do it like this, like to separate things. I would not probably, then you get also some advantages when, for example, you think about disaster recoveries or issues. If like one cluster has a huge problem, the other one is not affected. And so it all depends on what you're trying to achieve there. And at one point there are tools out there to then actually go out and deploy to these different clusters in one manner, right? If you're talking about GitOps scenarios and stuff like that, this is something we could basically potentially set up for all these different types of clusters. And then we put something, a technology in front, whatever we need. And yeah, there's, again, it's a very good question. And I'm sure there are people looking into this, that 100%, but we would need to understand a little bit more why you want to do this and what the goal is.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add in there real quick, just because it's popped into my head when he was talking. I think probably for like 80% of organizations that are going to try to pull that off, like they're going to need some kind of abstraction, right? There's going to need some kind of layer on top of all that stuff that's going to help them do that, right? Some tool set, some service. Because it's kind of like, to me, thinking about building, just a bare metal Kubernetes cluster by yourself. That ain't easy. But it's not hard to spin up an AKS cluster, right? So that most people are going to go spin up the managed cluster, right? You know what I mean? So I think what'll happen is for the 80% of people out there in the future, there's going to be some kind of high level abstraction that'll help you do that over multiple clouds. Because I think for most people, it's going to be way too much engineering. I don't think that, the average company has the operational maturity to pull that off.
Yep, definitely. And again, and probably you don't want to, right? That comes back to the problem we had earlier, like with like finding skilled people, right? If you have 5 people doing that, do you rather like let them spend like running the Kubernetes cluster, make sure everything works there, or do you have them running actually trying to figure out the architectures, building applications, putting the applications there, deploying these, adding more stuff to it. You really want to go higher up in the stack, especially with the skill shortage we have, and let them focus on the things which really matter. Because at the end, I mean, I had to learn this the hard way, right? I'm a diehard server guy. No one cares about the server. Like, no one. The server has a reason it's there in that space. And the same thing is true for cloud services as well. There is a reason why they're there. And that's at the end, the application and the end user experience, the data there. That is the things which matter. And at the end, the other things are just tools to achieve that. And so I completely agree with that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that what you're talking about, that's, I think, the most of the companies is taking a eye on. There is a hybrid is a scenario like somebody using a AKS or EKS or GKE. Let us do this kind of stuff for you. We can build the infrastructure for you. But let's Rancher Kubernetes engine, Kubernetes platform. There are so many others. Companies have built out those tools over the past 2 or 3 years in the Kubernetes and cloud native space. So I think they are looking at this seriously, because there is no cloud is always a challenge, because there are so many services running in the cloud. Kubernetes is also a challenge because there is so much stuff into the Kubernetes, and they know this stuff is really harder. Let this stuff, put this stuff to us, and you manage your work or apps on top of it. We can build out the Kubernetes cluster for you, and you can deploy an application on top of you. I think that's right. Now people are talking about, and they are building our applications and tools around that, and enterprises are always looking at the tool. So before I let you go, to both of you guys, there is a question I think I have received over the emails and a lot in our Discord server, Cloud Native Azure, a lot. The people are in the DevOps space, and they are always, we're talking about the DevOps as a cultural and the mind shift, rather than just a tooling or these kind of stuff. But do you think GitOps right now is how, let's say, what is GitOps? Is GitOps can work without the cultural changes? Or if that's, or do GitOps also require the cultural change as well? If not, we can migrate to the DevOps, to GitOps. What are the possible ways for me? So there are 3 or 4 questions out there, but I think both are the best guys to answer these questions.
So there's a lot of stuff in this one thing to cover, right? I would not put DevOps versus GitOps. I understand like GitOps can be part of DevOps, right? This is like GitOps is really, if we look it down, if I would say it's basically kind of a approach where, how would I say that it's not, that people don't hate me for it? You would do kind of like a infrastructure as code approach to deploying apps and configurations of your Kubernetes clusters, right? You write stuff into a Git repository, and then you make sure that your Kubernetes clusters gets that information from that Git repository, and then it configures the cluster as well as the application in that specific way. And there's multiple advantages, obviously, to that. Like, first of all, by using Git, you have commits. You can exactly see who did what, when, who approved. You can add approval steps. You can obviously then configure it that like multiple Kubernetes clusters deploy this. Like, it doesn't matter if it's just one, or it can be like thousands of Kubernetes clusters at the same time. So there are many things to it as well. And like in a culture shift, apps like depends on where you are with your culture right now. It depends a little bit on that. If you're already in a DevOps scenario, if you're already thinking infrastructure as code as well, if that's not something new to your organization, then this is just another method or tool, basically method and tooling in your repertoire. But if you are obviously someone who still like deploys manually, then this will be a change for you. I think. How do you look at it, Mike?
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I mean, there's so many organizations that I've worked with, even like recently in the last year, where they're still like in a Windows world RDPing to a web server and then opening an ASPX file with Notepad and then pasting like a new line of code and hitting save and calling that a deployment, right? Like you can't do that. But there's tons of people out there that are still doing that. And I don't think that, you know, if you look at the industry and you look at the marketing, it's easy to forget about that, right? It's easy to like think that everybody's just crushing it with cloud native, but that's not really what it is in the field, man. There's a lot of people that are struggling. So just basically learning, you know, or just learning basic Git workflow is a huge step for a lot of organizations, let alone GitOps, right? So yeah, I mean, it depends on the culture now, to Thomas's point. And if you're not open to command line, right, and you're not open to writing some code, it's going to be really uncomfortable, and you're going to have a hard time getting buy-in from everybody else in the organization. So yeah, I mean, it's all rooted in DevOps, you know, just like Thomas said, and adopt those patterns, be open to them. And, you know, over time, once your teams are familiar with how Git works, then you can go on to GitOps and start, you know, doing that kind of stuff. And I think that it's going to be huge, man. I mean, I'd love like having a source of authority, right? Like a central place, a mono repo or whatever. It's like, all right, I know exactly what's going on with everything. It's right here. I think that's compelling.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Now, especially if you think about if some of the cloud providers, if there would be one cloud provider who would have offer a tool to already integrate that in basically any other cloud provider or on-prem, wouldn't that be great? I'm not saying, well, we have that, so that's just like to reference. No, but I see like this again is a huge benefit. I think also like if you're looking at it, if you're already dealing with Kubernetes, if you're already comfortable doing container deployments, I mean, this is not a big. I don't believe so. But Mike, you correct me if I'm like see that too optimistic. Then this is not a big deal anymore for you. You will just see the concept. Oh, okay, that's how it's done. Because if you're already in the container space, you kind of like. You're not the person anymore who goes into a container and installs something, right? Like you're going to go into a VM and install something. But if you are obviously still in that mode where exactly what Mike was saying, when you RTP or SSH into a server and then install something, and then this is the setup process, then this is a big concept which changes for you.
Yeah, I agree, Thomas. People that are doing containers and stuff and already doing Kubernetes, like GitOps isn't going to be scary at all. And I think that for anybody listening that's like, oh, you know, Git is like super complicated. It's not. It's so simple. Like if you just took a day, right, to sit down and go through one of those Git like tutorials, you would know what you're doing. Don't be afraid of it. It's not hard at all.
Yeah, you just need to have the time. You just need to have the time.
And by the way, like the documentation is awesome. Like that people are building all these tools that support Markdown. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather write Markdown than HTML all day or use some weird editor. Like Markdown is just insanely cool. So get into that, man. Like be open to learning Git in GitHub. It's not hard at all.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think right now there are two tools, that's Argo CD and Flux, and these are the two popping up. And I think that right now GitOps is getting simpler and simpler as that progresses. There is so much innovation in this space and this kind of stuff. And I think there are questions people in mind, how do we learn this kind of stuff or GitOps or these kind of stuff? So when I started learning about Kubernetes and Docker, then this is really hard for me to pick up because I'm not a Linux guy. I'm the Windows user for a very long time, and having not hitting the Linux, I think for in a college industry never. Then I think about that industry came into this market by steps, like they are studying Linux and they're adopting. Eventually they aim to jump into the container and Kubernetes world. So let's do this approach. Go back in time, what's before in the containers, the VM. So from VM to jump into the container and Kubernetes, I think you can learn this kind of stuff. And if you're in the GitOps space, I think you go check out if you haven't explored the DevOps, I think GitOps going to be challenging for you. Go explore DevOps as well. Then you give the analogy of how people worked before, and then you accept the challenges in there. And then you tell your boss, by using the GitOps, these are the approaches, these are the advantages we can get. Everybody able to know where the source code, where our repository, the single source of truth, and every kind of that. I think this is always step-to-step process. It's not a one-night process to learn all these kind of stuff. You can learn step by step, going a ladder from one step to another to these kind of stuff. So wrapping up the discussion, wonderful talks with you guys. Always pleasure talking to you. It's been a wonderful time. Every time I spend a great amount of time, I feel pleasure and feel really happy to talk with you. So before I let you go, what are your extracurricular activities beyond DevOps, Kubernetes, and GitOps?
Wait, can you repeat the question?
What are your extracurricular activities? If you manage free time?
Like outside of work?
Yes.
Oh man, I'm just working 24/7, aren't you? No, I'm just joking. For me, I've been busy lately, but I'm getting back into travel now that over in the US, that's starting to lighten up a little bit. So I've been traveling more. I'm big on hitting the weights, so I enjoy going to the gym. spend a lot of time like getting outside. I live in Arizona in the US, so it's super nice right now. I can actually go outside and hike and get out into the mountains. So for me, it's all about getting away from the desk, activating the body, because I spend a lot of time on my computer.
Yes.
As I mean, I'm based in Switzerland, so what like all those Swiss people do is eating chocolate and cheese, right? That's my thing. No, but to be honest, I like to do, like, play different like types of sports. I'm also like big, well, not big, but I'm into running as well, because that's something gives me some like good mind, gives me some free time in my head, no devices, nothing, which I like some disconnect, right? And lately I'm up into paddle tennis. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. It's kind of like a mix between tennis and squash or something like that. It's hard to explain, but that's actually a lot of fun, right? And so that is what I enjoy playing.
Yes, absolutely. And what about Amelia? I think you also spend time with Amelia as well.
Oh yeah. I'm since this summer I'm a proud dad of a little girl. So there's a lot of learnings for me there as well. It's not just in the job; it's also learning as a parent, right? And so it absolutely is a fantastic moment in my life so far. Really enjoy it. And obviously, like, it also gives me a lot of energy and some disconnect as well.
Yes, absolutely. Me and Mike are doing hard work for the Emilia as well. When he grow up, he can enjoy listening to our podcast and jump to the cloud and Azure and GitOps easily. Not managing enough time as well.
I will definitely get her a Cloudskills subscription and probably some bootcamps, something like that, when she's old enough.
Yeah, let's let her have her childhood first. Let's not like torture her. Let her grow up first.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Won't take much time. You're always busy, but thank you very much for spending time with me today. And always catching you up again in the future as well, because I'm learning from you and seeing what you are tweeting today, what you are talking about. I think that if you are into the Azure and GitOps and DevOps and Cloud Native space, go check out cloudskills.io. I think it's a wonderful place for you to check for your core courses, and wonderful place for hands-on guides on DevOps and Linux administration. I think go check that out as well. And also follow Mike on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And also follow Thomas on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Both actively around these communities and always share the wonderful content with you. So Thomas is a person for you if you are in the Azure space and want to know. Go and check out his website, thomas.ch, I guess. And thank you very much, guys. Hope to catch up to you again in the future. Bye-bye, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me on. Bye.
If I ask you to teach Kubernetes to the people, how do you take that challenge, or how you look at this challenge of teaching Kubernetes to others?
Yeah, I love that challenge. I do that challenge every day. And that's like why I took the role at Amazon. Was I liked being able to teach people, but I like teaching people in slightly different ways than some people. I like to teach the way I like to learn. In a lot of cases, that's with props, and that's with visual aids, and that's with whiteboards. And I like to draw things. And we have a show at Amazon called Containers from the Couch. And my team, we have guests come on. We try to teach different Kubernetes concepts. Most of the shows that, like, if I'm in charge of teaching it, will have some prop involved, and I'll bring in something for a visual aid, because that's how, when I thought of it, I'm like, how does security work? It's like, okay, well, how does a door lock work? That's secure, right? Like, that's, like, for me, like a physical, like, thing. So how would a door lock be similar to RBAC? And I'm like, okay, well, how can I tie these things together and make it more easier to understand for people? And I remember doing I did a Bottle Rocket episode, and we were talking about upgrades. Like, how does Bottle Rocket do this, like, partition swapping for, like, how it boots and stuff like that? So I had, like, bowls of cereal and 2 different types of cereal. Like, here's the new version of Bottle Rocket, here's the old version. And as we pour it on either side of the bowl, like, that's when it actually, like, flips over and we boot to the other side. I think it was like Cheerios and Fruit Loops or something. But to me, like, that was just how I liked to learn things. I love